I'm honored today to be joined by Gary Dittmer, a Vietnam War hero, the recipient of a Purple Heart CIB and Bronze Star with V device. Gary was wounded in Vietnam and describes these experiences and what he went through returning from Vietnam in his book, Easy Giggles, A Vietnam Saga, and is the treasurer of the 25th Infantry Division Association. So we discussed a little bit of that, but he talks about his experiences in the Cacti Association and what it's done for him, being able to talk with those he served with and other Vietnam veterans that had the same experiences, really returning home and not being welcomed as we do today, right? Thank you for your service. It's something that we take for granted, but that was not his experience. So Gary is an all-around great man, and he joined us today on the Cacti Legends pod. Thank you for being on this call and being willing to share your story today.
Sure, absolutely. My pleasure.
So let's just start with the beginning, right? So as you describe in your book, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, just your experience of, you are one of the few that volunteered to, you didn't draft yourself, but you paved the way to get to that point.
Right,
So
right.
explain a little bit of that and your
Sure,
experiences at the beginning of your Army career.
sure, absolutely. Well, I always felt strongly about military service. My grandparents, my grandfather, his brother were in the service between World War I and World War II. One was a Marine, one was in the Army. My uncle was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th coming up. My dad was in field artillery. He dropped out of school, actually. He was going to Roman Catholic High School in Philadelphia and dropped out at the beginning of 11th grade and was in the reserves for a while. Then he went into active duty, and his superiors recommended him for OCS, and he went out to Fort Sill, traveled across the country back then, and he did so well in OCS, they kept him as an instructor. So
Wow.
it was, I've always had that kind of in the back of my mind. And when Vietnam started happening, I mean, I was like most Americans. I wasn't familiar with Vietnam or actually where it was. We all learned that kind of together. And the story sounded real to me that, it was an expansion of communism, that China and Russia were behind it, forcing weapons down the Ho Chi Minh Trail to disrupt the lives of these people trying to live in a democracy. Well, it turned out to be quite different than that, but that's what I believed at the start. And then really the impetus, the thing that got me started, I was in college. I was a freshman at the University of Tampa. And, I mean, I was set. I was on the basketball team. I was set up with a scholarship for the second semester. And then on one of the trips back home, I think at Easter, I ran into some people that knew a guy that lived down the street from me. His name was Richard. And they said, he's in Vietnam. And I said, what? Because he went to play football somewhere. And in college, that's the last I heard. I mean, DC area is very mobile. And people, once they're out of high school, the parents retire, they go to different parts of the country, sometimes overseas. We had a lot of State Department kids and Army brats. So he kind of disappeared. I hadn't seen him for like 2 years. And then I learned he was in Vietnam. So I got his address. I wrote him a letter. He wrote me back. And the same day I received his letter and read his letter, another friend came into my dorm room and told me that he was killed in action, and he had a copy of the newspaper that reported it. And it just shocked me. And, I remembered a lot from the letter, and I put it in the book, what he said. Essentially, he said, stay in school, don't go to Vietnam, which
Yeah.
to me meant the opposite.
Right.
Go to
All the
Vietnam, see
action
what it's
for
all
you.
about. Yeah, yeah. And I thought it was my obligation because, when I would come home, I would take the train. We couldn't afford airfare then. Back then, trains were much cheaper than airfare.
Mm.
And there would be protesters always on the train going to DC. DC was a center of protest during Vietnam. And so we had interactions with the protesters. Most of them were decent kids. They just were against war,
Right.
generally. a lot of it was self-interest. They didn't want to go, the boys at least. So anyway, I decided that I had worked for the phone company for about a year and a half after high school before I went to college. And so I thought rather than return to school in the fall, I'm just going to go back to the phone company and work for them until I get drafted. And then it'll be my turn. That's how I'll go. My justification was I couldn't see myself as a career soldier. So I thought, I'll give 2 years. I'll give 2 years of my life, do my duty, and then come back to the real world, as we used to say.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I went back, worked for the phone company. Great job, great pay. I was construction. I was a lineman. And then right before Christmas, I got the letter from LBJ, welcome, report for duty, January 27th. So January 27th, 67 is when I reported in Fairfax, Virginia. And it's funny where they picked us up, the bus, right on that corner. It's right across from the historic building, Fairfax Courthouse. And there's still Civil War. Well, at the time, they moved them out of someone's sensitivity. I don't know who, but they had Civil War cannons out front. So I thought, well, this is, how many soldiers in the history of this country stood here where I'm standing
Wow.
today?
Yeah.
It was kind of moving. And so that's how I got in. Went through basic at Fort Bragg, which was interesting with the airborne troops, the 82nd based there. Special forces were small back then, and now I
Right.
think Fort Bragg is mostly special forces and the 82nd. But back then, you didn't really see many special forces guys. But 82nd guys were everywhere, and we would go out on force marches, and they'd be on one side of the road, we'd be on the other. There'd be some shouting back and forth, of course, but
I'm sure that would be the same way today.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a good time. Basic was challenging. It was coming up almost on another anniversary, but January, February, and March in basic in North Carolina, it was cold.
Oh yeah.
And it was tough. And then from there we went to Fort Polk. And when we arrived at Fort Polk, we were on a bus from New Orleans. We all flew into New Orleans and then took a bus to Fort Polk. And we were all wondering, are we going to Vietnam? Maybe we're going to Germany. Some guys are talking out loud. And actually, the Israelis and the Arabs are getting ready to go into it with their little war in June. So we're thinking maybe we'll go to the Middle East. So we didn't know where we were going. And then as you entered Fort Polk back then, there was a big billboard that had a picture of a GI standing over three figures dressed in black pajamas. And it said, aggressiveness and firepower will win. So he said, okay, we know where we're going. This is Vietnam training. And it was. And the training was quite good, actually. I was in the best shape of my life. I mean, I was on a Division I basketball team, and I didn't really know what shape was like until we started training at AIT. Up before breakfast, running at least a mile, eat breakfast, get out of breakfast, and you're running with your rifle, your helmet liner, and your backpack to classes all during the day. You'd run to different locations. And starting from, breakfast, we would just run to a class, get out of the class, run to the next class, run back for lunch, run to the next class. Your fatigues would be absolutely soaked by the end of the day. Just Louisiana,
Fort Polk is not, it's not forgiving. And the heat and
but it was great
swamps.
for Vietnam. It was great getting used to that for Vietnam because we didn't know what we were in for in Vietnam. And Southeast Asian heat, there's nothing like it. I mean, the hot humidity, it is just amazing. But the cool thing was when we left, well, I had a thing. I passed all the tests for OCS, and I was scheduled to go to OCS, and I deal with this in the book. And they changed, they said, okay, you're going to get a week leave after AIT. And my girlfriend and I planned to get married, and we did. And we're still married. She's sitting out in the living room now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we survived all that. But they said, they called us in about 2 weeks before graduation. The guy's going to OCS, and they said, you're going directly to OCS. There's no leave involved. The training schedule changed. You're going directly in it. You can leave after OCS. I said, I can't do that. We made plans. We've got money spent, people invited. I said, I got to go. I've got to go home and get married. He says, no, you can't go home. And they got a little funky with me. They said, okay, look, if you don't go to OCS, we're going to put you on a plane the next day you graduate and send you to Vietnam as like the And this was an E5 telling me this, a Spec 5. And I thought he was bluffing, but I didn't want to take a chance. So I talked to my dad, and he contacted our congressman, and the congressman sent a telegram to the commanding general of Fort Polk telling him I should get my leave like everyone else. And I'm
Wow.
sure Spec 5 heard about that. So anyway, we left Polk. We got a week leave, a week's worth of leave, and then we went to Fort Lewis. And we were waiting literally for our ship to come in. We were scheduled, there were 400 of us. We were scheduled to go overseas on a ship, a Navy ship. Actually, it was a USS Upshur, and it was staffed by merchant marines with naval officers commanding it. And so we spent, I guess, maybe 3 weeks to a month. I don't remember exactly in Fort Lewis, and it was very liberal. I mean, all we did was physical training. We did.
Yeah.
I don't think we fired a rifle up there. We were just literally waiting for the boat to come in, and we were called B Packet 25th Infantry, and we were commanded by a captain, Captain Dave Collins, who actually just died a few years ago. And I got to know him through Cacti reunions. He's a great guy, good guy. Back in the day, he looked like Perry Como. I saw my mother had a crush on Perry Como. I said, boy, if she came up here, she'd like him. But we just ran, and I asked him, I said, Dave, what is a packet? I never heard that term in the Army before. He says, Gary, I don't know what it is either, but I was in command of 400 men, as
Wow.
a captain. So we got on the ship, and it was, the biggest ship I'd seen. Up to that point, my experience with being out on water was very limited. We would go to, growing up in the Philly area, we'd go to Atlantic City or
Right.
Wildwood, go to the shore, and maybe go out on a fishing boat once in a while. This thing was enormous. It was a World War II troop transport ship, still in service, and we left Puget Sound in the evening. We boarded it at, O Dark 100, like you always do, and we got assigned to our bunks, which were way down in the bottom. Everyone got a hammock with about 12 inches between you and the fellow above you, so when you're in the bunk, you dare not sit straight up. You had to kind of roll out of the hammock and then stand up. But that was an incredible experience. I mean, how many people can say they sailed across the Pacific Ocean? We did
Unbelievable.
as young men. Pacific Ocean is aptly named. It was very calm for like 99% of the trip. And then we were north of Hawaii, and we had a typhoon.
Oh my
And
God.
it was like 3 in the morning, and we're being thrown violently from one side. The hammocks are banging against each other. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So we
That's
all
like the
kind
only
of
time you probably are hoping to get to Vietnam was
exactly,
getting rocked
exactly.
left and right.
Yeah. So we all kind of came to at the same time, got dressed. We went up on the deck, and I couldn't believe what I saw. I mean, that Pacific Ocean, there were waves like mountains. I mean, taller than the ship. And I thought this was a big ship. It felt like we were on a canoe out there. And it was the movement was constant. We were going at an angle to the waves, the way the waves were flowing in. And so the boat would go up, down, right, left. And that was the constant movement. And everyone got sick. Everyone was walking around with a green face, couldn't eat. I couldn't eat. We were in it for 3 days, and I couldn't eat. The last day I said, I got to get something to eat today. I can't take this. But I was fine. I went down to the galley. They had good food, and I'm carrying my oatmeal back to my table, and someone spilled the coffee pot. So the coffee, I didn't look at
Oh,
the
jeez.
portholes. I didn't want to see the water because that would have set me off. Just that coffee flowing across the floor just set me off. And you don't have anything in your stomach. You just do a dry heave, which is very
Right.
painful. Everybody's like, it was amazing. So we stopped at Okinawa to refuel, and the Navy had a nice setup for us there at a club, and they had a Filipino band that played Motown and all kinds of American songs, and they couldn't speak English. They just knew the words to the song. It was the funniest thing. Some guys went up to try to talk to them, said, I don't know speak English. What? You're singing, good music. And they said, no, can't speak English. But it was fun. We drank way too much beer. And then we got back on the ship, and it was about another day, maybe a day and a half. We went to Da Nang and dropped off an artillery unit. And then we sailed south to about halfway down the coast, a town called Quinyan.
Hmm.
And we disembarked there. and then ultimately caught a plane, C-130, that took us north to a place called Dak Pho, which is, again, maybe, I don't know, a couple hundred miles north of Quy Nhon, I would guess, maybe a little less. And we went to a little place called, it was an old French base right at the base of a mountain, probably been there since the 40s or before, probably
Right.
before. I mean, French had been in Vietnam since the 1890s, I believe, is when they
Yeah.
arrived. And so we set up, the way the Army did it back then, we would have that was like our brigade headquarters at, it was called, it had several names over the years. It was known as Bronco. I think at one point it was called Montezuma. I don't know why they changed the names of these LZs. But anyway, they would set up, they called them fire bases. So that at least two fire bases with an artillery unit on each one, so that if one got attacked with one of these massive onslaughts where they just charge and they're trying to overrun you, one could fire on the other, and help out with covering fire from the artillery.
Yeah.
So we were first of the 35th. I was assigned to A Company, 1st Battalion, 35th Infantry, technically 3rd Brigade Task Force. We were called a task force of the 25th Infantry. And so that was the initial setup. I was assigned to A Company. We started out on this fire base. It was just known as OD. It was called OD, which we're all familiar with. And that's where our battalion commander was. And we would, several companies operated out of there. We would typically, once we got settled in and everyone was comfortable, we would go out in the field for usually 3 weeks and come back for 3 days, and then go back out for 3 weeks, back for 3 days. That was kind of the routine. Sometimes it was shorter, sometimes it was longer. At first, we operated just out of OD on a daily basis. But go into a little bit about that. We had a real creative CO who was new. The commanding officer, and this is one thing that killed me about not going to OCS. Officers only spent 6 months in the field. We spent a year. We spent a full year. I said, "Damn, I knew I should have gone to
Yeah.
OCS."
They were looking out for you. You just didn't know it.
Yeah, exactly. So we got a new CO at the time we got there. His name was Ellerson, Jeff Ellerson, lives in Arizona now. We met him once at a cacti reunion we had in Scottsdale years ago. Good guy. I always liked him because he was creative. He made one big mistake that I'll get to, but most of the time, he thought outside the box, and he was criticized for that from the Army hierarchy. I learned that by talking to another cacti member. He's a four-star general. I think his name is
Hmm.
Brownington or something like that. He lives in Hawaii now, and he told me he just thought outside of the box, and no one really trusted him. But that's exactly what we needed in Vietnam, because before he came, we would go out on patrols during the daytime, and they would sit back with snipers and just pick you off.
Right.
They fire a couple of shots and they disappear into the jungle. You'd never find them. You'd shoot up the jungle, you'd never find them. They'd be
Yeah.
gone. So he said, he got permission from the battalion commander to operate at night. And a lot of guys weren't comfortable with that. I was. I loved it because they
Yeah.
can't see you. They didn't have night
Right.
vision. Um,
Which,
and
for those that are young soldiers that don't know a whole lot about Vietnam, nobody had night vision. Is that?
exactly. We had we had the first version of modern night vision. It was called a starlight scope. You can see it in the Army Museum, but it was pretty big. It was about 12 inches long, and it weighed a little more than the M16. So nobody
Jeez.
wanted to carry the starlight scope. I think we
On
had
top of all
one.
the other things you're carrying in the
Yeah,
jungle.
exactly. We had I think one per company. I don't think it was one per every platoon. So he had one per company. And it was beautiful. It worked really well, but it was too big. I mean, really, it was like that long, and it was like an old-fashioned telescope. But the view you could find from it, even on the darkest of nights, was just breathtaking. I mean, it was just incredible. So anyway, we worked at night. We would typically leave OD around when it got dark. That time of year, I think it was around 6 o'clock. It would get dark. That's when we would head out. And the first mission we went on was a midnight raid, actually, of a village. And our platoon was chosen to be the point platoon. and nobody wanted to walk point. I've been there maybe through 2 weeks, a week and a half, something like that. And I said, I'll do it. I'll walk point out there. So they said, you're crazy. You don't want to walk point, But I met with the CO. We laid out a map. He showed me where we were going, and we pulled out a compass and we got some, orientation on what trail we were going to follow and what trail we were going to come back on. We talked back and forth. Um, and so we did it. And he had the Starlight scope, and he had a couple of Vietnamese interpreters on that mission. We had one spot we left OD from that wasn't mined. We had a lot of anti-personnel mines around the perimeter, as you can imagine. So we went, and nothing happened. I mean, they went in, questioned people, and we didn't find anything. But it was kind of an interesting assignment, and I didn't mind walking point at all. I felt safer on point than I did back in the rear. I was in the rear once when we took fire, and it's mass confusion. When someone opens up on you, full automatic with an AK. AK has a special sound. I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
A lot of guys listening are familiar with. But you hit the dirt, and first you can't really get oriented as to where the shooting's coming from. You're listening. Where is that from the front? Is that from the side? Is it from the right? And I didn't like that feeling. I would rather be up front where you knew specifically where it was coming from, and hopefully you didn't get hit on that first burst,
Yeah.
uh, so you could return fire and direct everyone where they were. So anyway, we operated like that at night. We were very successful in Duck Pho area. We had very few. I don't think we had any casualty. Very few casualties of our own. But every night we would kill one or two or more North Vietnamese coming. They would come to the flatland, the valley there, looking for food, medicine, things like that, and they would pay for it. I mean, they carried a lot of cash with them,
Hmm.
so they wouldn't just steal it or take it. They would pay for it because they wanted support from the
Right.
people. So they put
Yeah.
money in their pocket. They're going to buy their support. So that went on for about a month, and it was pretty cool. I don't want to belabor the point, but I'll just tell one other uh, incident that happened when I was there. We were going up in the mountains. The mountains were to our west, and we were looking for the second NVA division. They were up there somewhere, and we left again at about 6 o'clock at night. The whole company leaving in single file. That was
Hmm.
quite a trek. And we were somewhere towards the rear. Our platoon was somewhere towards the rear that night. And we called it humping. I think the guys today call it rucking, but we humped from 6 o'clock at night to midnight. Midnight, we got to our location, and we're up in the mountains. We climbed this huge hill to make the break into the mountain range. And everyone is just, hungry, sweaty, tired. And we set up for an all-night ambush. So the whole company is lined up in an all-night ambush, stayed up the entire night. Nothing happened. And the next morning, we would always wake up or start to move before dawn. But I mean, yeah, before dawn.
Right.
And we'd move for about an hour. Then we'd set up in an area and we'd try to sleep during the day so that we'd be ready to go out that night and do it again. So we did that. We get set up, our platoon set up, and then they wanted to set up. You would always set up security. So the squad I was in, we were chosen to provide security for our side of the perimeter. It was a pretty big perimeter, and it had several trails leading into it. So we were going on one trail, and I took two guys with me, and we were the security on that side. We walked up with our lieutenant, Tim Peters, and we looked at the site. And I talk about this in my book, but we were about, I'd say, between 50 and 100 meters from the main body, from the main company. And it was me. I was the first one in line. Guy behind me was a guy named Jan. He was an M79 guy, which wasn't too useful because we were in the jungle then, thick. And then the third guy had a rifle. And I just, we knew the North Vietnamese worked at night. We weren't expecting them to move in the daylight. I said, why don't you guys just get some sleep? I'm going to stay up. And I was going to write a letter back home. I owed my wife a letter and my parents. So as I was setting up the ambush, I describe in the book, it was an S shape with the S lying on its back. In other words, the trail came down like this and over and down. And we were right at the second bend. And my position was about 4 feet from the corner. I didn't want them to get a chance to see me. If they came around the corner, I wanted to see them first and surprise them, obviously. And as I'm looking at the site, because it's thick jungle, to the right was elephant grass, tall elephant grass, like 3.5 to 4 feet tall, and just thick jungle otherwise. And so I was thinking, should I put out a claymore? Should I bother with it? The chances of them coming, it's daylight. They're not going to move in the daylight. And then I was a Boy Scout, and for some reason, what popped in my head was be prepared. Remember, as
Yeah.
a Boy Scout, they always said, prepared. So I said, you know what? Don't be lazy. Put out a claymore. So I put it out. I set it so that it covered most of the area the trail they would come up on before turning to their right to face me. And I set it. I ran the wire, and we didn't have Bluetooth then, so I ran the wire, dug a little trench, covered it up nicely, tried to make it look natural, and went back to my position. I had the plunger sitting right in front of me, the Claymore mine. We called it a plunger. It did look like, little, almost a little smaller than an iPhone,
Yeah.
thick, and you just squeeze it. So I set that up and I got out a writing pad and I start writing my letter. It had my rifle right there, of course. And I'm sitting down and, you hear these tales from the guys that have been there for a while. Oh, the North Vietnamese are so good. You can't hear them move. You got to be careful if you're the last guy in a patrol. They'll come up behind you. You won't hear them and they'll cut you. All these stories. So I'm
Yeah.
sitting and I dismissed it. I played sports and they always say that about the best team. Oh, they run faster than anyone. No, no. I said, yeah, right. Let's
Yeah.
play the game and see how they do. So I'm sitting there writing. I didn't even get past one page and I hear all this noise. And the weird thing, I'm going, what the hell is that? Because I turned my head. The trail was running to my right, going up and then to the left around that corner, and they're coming from that direction. So I turned my head. So my right ear was back towards the company, and the noise wasn't, I just wanted to verify to myself, where's the noise coming from? It's coming from my left ear, meaning it's coming from there. And I waited until they actually turned the corner because my biggest fear was we had guys that couldn't read maps.
Yeah.
And sometimes guys would get, they'd say they're in one place or really in another. And my biggest fear was killing an American or
Right.
killing a South Vietnamese soldier. I didn't want to, so I wanted to see them first. And before, I just didn't want to shoot blindly or blow the claymore blindly. So they came around the corner, and sure enough, they were they were the enemy. And so I shot the first two. They went down so quick I couldn't believe it. And then I blew the claymore and came around the corner, and by this time, my platoon, all the guys heard it. My lieutenant came running up. He had taken off his shoes. He's running up barefoot. And our machine gunner had he was a sergeant. He actually had the M60 machine gun torn apart. He was cleaning it. So he
Oh
threw
my
it
God.
together. He comes running up. I mean, it was really because no one was
It's,
expecting it.
it's just like they wrote it up, right? It's just like
Yeah.
exactly like Doctrine.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it went well. I was given credit for killing 7 North Vietnamese. Actually, I wounded the last one. He was wounded by the claymore, and he came back. Someone else shot him because, quite honestly, my rifle jammed. It
Wow.
was my first jam I ever had with an M16, and I was, you heard all these rumors, the M16 jams. That's a horrible weapon. Blah blah blah. But it wasn't the rifle, it was the cartridge. You know,
Yeah.
I wore a bandolier of magazines across my chest. And when you get shot at, what do? You hit the dirt. Well, I think the magazines weren't that
They weren't resilient.
no.
They'd jam into
Yeah,
the ground. Yeah.
exactly. You'd hit a rock and it would dent the cartridge. And my cartridge was dent. That's why it got stuck. It wouldn't go all the way into the chamber. So I struggled with that and finally knocked it out with my cleaning rod. And I was ready to go again. And someone else actually killed the last guy. But so they said, okay, good job. Go get some sleep. We're going to replace you with some other guys to perform security the rest of the day. I said, fine with me, because we were only there for maybe a half an hour. So we got to go back and crawl under a tree somewhere and fall asleep if we could. And then I heard this chopper come in. Chopper came in. It was the battalion commander, the XO, the sergeant major. And I'm like, good Lord, what is this? And they wanted to see it. They wanted to see, because it was rare that we would kill that many North Vietnamese and not get anyone hurt. No
Right.
one was hurt. No one was hurt. So he wanted to see the situation, and then, I guess take notes and put it in lessons learned somewhere. But my platoon leader came back to get me, and and I have my shirt on, my fatigue shirt off. I'm laying, trying to get some sleep. He says, "Hey, Gary, come on. The battalion CO wants to meet you." I said, "What? Really?" I said, "Should I put my shirt on?" I said, "No, just come like this. Grab your rifle." I said, "Okay." So I ran up there, and sure enough, I met him. Good guy, Lieutenant Colonel Kimmel. I learned this after the war, after I came home, actually just a few years ago. He taught at West Point before being assigned to Vietnam as a battalion commander. He was
Mhm.
infantry, but he taught engineering at West Point, and he was indeed an engineer, but he was in the infantry branch. Good guy. We talked for a little bit. And he says, he surprised me, really. I wasn't expecting this. He said, "Okay, what can I do for you?" My
Yeah.
thoughts were wild. Send me to Palm Beach. Send me anywhere. I
Send me
said,
to my new wife.
right. But I said, look, I have to be reasonable. I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking, I have to be reasonable. I can't make an outrageous request. I said, how about a 3-day pass to the beach? Because they had some beautiful beaches. There was one, Vung Tau, that was south of Saigon. But we wound up going north, so I wound up getting a 3-day pass to China Beach in Da
Wow.
Nang, which was just breathtakingly beautiful. It was wonderful. So anyway, he said, okay. And another thing he said to me, which didn't register immediately, it registered much later. He said, if you got a scratch, this would be a silver star. I said, well, that's okay. I'm glad I didn't get a scratch. I didn't want to get a scratch, which means he put me in for a Bronze Star with V, which I got for that, which was and again I got that way after I got home and out of the hospital. I was awarded that at a nice ceremony right at Fort Belvoir. I live near Fort
Wow.
Belvoir today. Um, so that was my big event. That happened. I was there three
That's
weeks.
that's actually pretty amazing that,
Yeah,
I hear so many guys that talk about they didn't get the recognition for the things they did,
yeah,
or they knew somebody that didn't get the recognition that it did.
yeah,
So it just says a lot about his leadership that he was able
yeah,
to submit you for that. Even if you
yeah,
didn't get it right away,
yeah.
you know, you got it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, he was a good guy, and well, I'll just continue that story. I wrote a comment. There's a virtual, we call it the wall, the Vietnam Memorial, where everyone's name who is KIA there is they
Right.
have a picture and a little story, and you can comment. So I commented on Lieutenant Colonel Kimmel's. I said, he was a great guy, great leader, blah blah blah. And then I got a comment. I got an email. You leave your email address. I got an email from his son who is
Hmm.
in this area. His son was an engineer with the county, Fairfax County. And so we got together for lunch and talked. And he told me, that about his dad being a member of the faculty at West Point for a couple of years. He taught engineering, and he would have his son there when he was grading papers. He said, "Now," and he would explain why the student got the question wrong. He said, "Now look, this is what they should have done." Yeah. So his son got it like a teaching lesson as his father was grading the papers. But
Wow.
he was a good man, and unfortunately, he was KIA. Let's see, a couple months later, actually in November, it was in
Wow.
November, his chopper was shot down. Uh,
Hmm.
they were going too low, too slow from this. I wasn't there when it happened. I was on my 3-day pass to China Beach when he
No
got shot
kidding.
down, which is ironic. Yeah. Um, so I missed that action, but they had the North Vietnamese when we discovered this because we overran a position later, and I saw how they did it. But when they would set up an anti-aircraft, they had the equivalent of a 50 caliber, but it was a Chinese. They went by
Right.
metric. Get
The
the
recoil rifle,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And they had real small butterfly grips. I could barely get my hands around a butterfly grip, but they would dig a trench, a circular trench they would have real long tripods. So the fellow operating their equivalent M50 caliber, and it was set up for any aircraft because it had, lead elements on each side. You lead the helicopter and you shoot it down that way, and they could rotate 360 degrees in this trench. They would jig it. It was a hole, really, like a big
Yeah.
hole with a gun in the middle, and they could rotate 360 and that's and it was hard to to uh, to shoot them. I mean, because the only thing, their heads were the only
Yeah,
thing above ground.
camouflaged, right?
Yeah, you really had to shoot low, and most of the time we were shooting too high to do any damage to them. And I learned that when we overran one during Tet a couple of days before I got wounded, and
Mm.
I saw they left the 50 caliber. We were that close to them. They just ran and left the 50 caliber in place. We were chasing them for about a week, but I'll get to that later. So anyway, that was quite an experience. I was put in for NCO school. Third Brigade ran an NCO school, and then of course, Fourth Division ran one in Play Coup that we would go to. But in August, right around the 1st of August, the Fourth Division and the 25th swapped Third Brigades, which was a
Yeah,
bit
I read
insane.
that.
We
You
were,
talked about that in
yeah,
your book.
yeah, we were so far away from the 25th headquarters. They're down just west of Saigon in a place called Cu Chi. And we're up north by Duc Pho. And then we went further north to Chu Lai. We operated there for a while. And then we went further north to Da Nang, which is with the Marine Corps. We were up there operating with the Marine Corps. It was called I Corps. I think there were four. One, two, three, four was all the way in the south, and one was in the north, up bordering, the DMZ
Yeah,
down just below Da Nang, and we wound up there, and we were just way out of the control of the 25th, and I think it was a practical thing they did to switch control because we were closer to Pleiku than we were to Cu Chi. I don't know. I don't know the
yeah.
politics behind it, but anyway. We became part of the fourth, and the first and 35th later was deactivated, but they were returned to the 25th. And actually, now the first and 35th was reactivated recently
It
in
did, yeah. We
an
just
operating unit. Yeah,
I think
yeah.
actually right now as we do this interview, Chano, the president of the association, and Brian Disk are in Hawaii, and they're gonna
Oh, really?
link in with the first of the 35th. So
Oh, good for them.
trying to
Yeah,
reconnect, that almost like the lost battalion, right? We
sure, sure.
now that they're back in and just get them back uh, assimilated into the association again. So
Yeah,
pretty cool
yeah.
that they brought it back, especially for your generation of guys that,
Absolutely.
it kind of fell off for a while and it's back.
Yeah, yeah. I think all of us are happy about that. And it's good that it happened now because a lot of guys are dying. I mean, we're at that
Yeah.
age where, it's almost checkout time, and a lot of guys are dying each year. You read about someone else
Yeah.
uh, or more than one, but that's life. But
And that's why we want to get
yeah,
all of these stories out there and get them on tape
yeah,
and honor those. So you
yeah,
mentioned it a couple times.
yeah,
Got the book right here.
yeah. Absolutely.
Um,
Well,
Easy
let me.
Giggles, a Vietnam Saga.
Yeah. The
Um,
title, I get asked all that question about the title. How'd you come up with Easy Giggles? Well, when you're in war and you got a chance you're sitting with your buddy on guard duty or something, or you're stopping at a break for lunch, the conversation always comes up. What are you going to do after the war? What are you going to do when you get home? You're going to go to school? You're going to get a job? What are you going to do? And so I use the term easy giggles. Like one guy said, I'm going to lead a life of easy giggles, which is like
mm,
the concept of pursuit of happiness, like Jefferson's pursuit of happiness. We want to be happy for the rest of our lives. We don't want to fight anymore. We want to be peaceful. We want to live a good life. That's where that came up with a couple of guys just talking, quite honestly, at what they're going to do after the war. I think I had one guy, based on me, he wanted to teach high school and be a basketball coach. That was one of my early dreams, which faded away somewhere along the way. I did wind up teaching at university level, but not high school level, and I definitely wasn't a basketball coach. But yeah, it was, the whole experience of Vietnam. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm sorry." I said, "No, to me, it was a big adventure." I mean, think about it. I was 20 years old when I went in and sailed across the Pacific Ocean, stopped at Okinawa, all these places I read about in history books,
yeah.
and Vietnam going through. I mean, we saw more of Vietnam than most Vietnamese people because
Mm,
Vietnamese people, when we went there, well, and I'll tie this into the book in just a second, but when we went there, most Vietnamese people live and die in the same village. they're not mobile. It's not a mobile society like us. They just, oh, okay, I'm going off to college in Hanoi. And no, you're not. You're going to stay here and work in the rice field.
Right. It's
That's,
very that's similar to a lot of
yeah,
cultures, right? We're
yeah,
pretty unique in the fact that we do travel all over the place.
absolutely. Absolutely. But see, that was the impetus for writing the book. My wife um, was been pushing me for a couple of years to write a memoir for our children's sake, tell them who you are, where you grew up, what's important to you, so that, because you really don't get a chance to talk about that when you're together with family. The conversation always focuses on them. What are they doing? How can we help you? You never talk about yourself. So I said, okay, I'll start on it. But when I started on it, I started writing it. I said, because I always wondered, why were we in Vietnam? What forced us to get into Vietnam? Because I was there 3 weeks. And I was thinking, we shouldn't be here. This is crazy. These people, the villages didn't have water. They didn't have running water. They didn't have telephone service. No one had a car. Very few had bicycles. I know now they have a lot of scooters in the cities, but in the country where, a lot of the employment happened, the growing of rice, it was nothing. It was a primitive way of life, sleeping on dirt floors. I thought, what? This is the fifth century, for God's sakes. We're going back in time being here. They could use John Deere tractors, and they didn't need us shooting up the place. And it just didn't make sense for me. So I thought, you know what? I'll turn it into an investigation of how we got into the war. And that's what I tried to do. I did a lot of research looking back how the French got there. I mean, when Ho Chi Minh was born in 1890, um, he was under French rule. So
Hmm.
he was in a colony from day one. Someone else is telling you what to do, writing the rules. He was educated at a French school in Vietnam. Then he went to France. He went to France to study. His father was a teacher, actually, and his mother was pretty much a housewife, and she knitted a lot of things or made blankets or other things with yarn. Um, but his dad was a teacher who became a government official. So they were probably upper middle class. And Ho Chi Minh was really, he wanted more out of life than just to live there and, follow in his father's footsteps, be a local official. He really had a big goal in mind. So he went to France, studied in France for a while, worked as a chef or a cook. He became, I guess, pretty good at it because Cunard Lines hired him
Yeah.
as a on their ships, and he sailed to America. He sailed all around Europe. The one boat that he took to the U.S. Originated in Liverpool, England, and then sailed to New York. Uh, Back then, they would dock in Hoboken, right across the river from Manhattan, and then you'd take a ferry into the city. They didn't actually dock directly on the city. I don't know if they didn't have the facilities. Probably didn't have the facilities built for it. So he came to the U.S. That fascinated me. He came to because we knew so little about him. At least that was the claim of Johnson and McNamara, that they didn't know who this guy was. He worked for us during World War II. It's ridiculous. I learned that. I'm like, what? He was he when the Japanese, well, I'll cut the story a little short, but the Japanese obviously took over from the French. The French surrendered to Germany. So the Vichy government was favorable with Japan. And so the Japanese came into Vietnam and they said, okay, French guys, you can leave now. But they made their administrators stay because the French administrators knew how to run the country. They knew how to run the government. The Japanese just wanted to occupy the land and do what they did, just to control that part of Asia. And so Ho Chi Minh at that time formed what became known as the Viet Minh, a nationwide group of individuals to fight not only the French, well, they started it against the French, and then they they substituted the Japanese for the French. When the Japanese took over, they were fighting the Japanese. And towards the northern part of Vietnam, we had an air base in China, the southern part of China, that was used to bomb the Japanese and intercept them and so forth. And occasionally a plane would get shot down over sometimes China, sometimes Vietnam. And Ho Chi Minh and his men rescued American pilots and brought them back to base. Treated
Wow.
their wounds, brought them back to base. And so the what was then the precursor of the CIA, the OSS, had operations in China and Vietnam area. They were trying to get into Vietnam, but they didn't have a contact. Now they had a contact. This guy named, well, I think at that time he did go by Ho Chi Minh. He went by so many names. That's a puzzle. It's a mystery why he changed it. I read one account where it said he had over 200 pseudonyms during his life. I'm thinking, why would you do that? Was
It's
he on the 10
unbelievable.
most wanted list or something? You know, you know, I can't understand why. But anyway, he they wanted to make contact with him, and they had one fellow in China that spoke Chinese. He had good contacts. This fellow named Charles Fenn, who is another fascinating story. I'm so glad I ran into this character. He wrote a memoir about it, and I forget how I learned his name. Um, but he's a British citizen who worked for the Associated Press in I remember it as CIB, China, India, and Burma during the 30s. Um, and he was a photographer and a news reporter for the Associated Press in that area. So he had contacts, he knew the geography, he knew who the key leaders were. He knew General Chennault. He did a story about General Chennault, so he knew him on a personal one-to-one basis. So he got recruited into the OSS. I go into more detail in the book. I'll just give you the short version now, but by Donovan, Bill Donovan, Wild Bill Donovan, who started the OSS, who was
Yeah.
a World War I vet, very famous guy. I think he led the Fighting 69th in the First World War. Um, and he interviewed Fenn, and he said, I've got a perfect place for you if you want to join us. And Fenn, at that point, he came over. Um, to fight with the Marines. He joined the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps. He became a naturalized citizen. He meets with Donovan through his wife's. He married a woman in New York who was big in the art field, very
Hmm.
wealthy, very well known. He met again these figures from history. You couldn't make
It's
this up.
unbelievable. Yeah.
What is his name? Buckminster Fullman, the guy that invented or that popularized the geodesic dome.
Huh.
He was in New York. He was at the party, and he was friends with Bill Donovan. And he met Charles Fenn at the party. He says, "You got to talk to Bill Donovan. He's got a place for you, I'm sure." So sure enough, he did. He sent him to China, and the OSS set up operations in China, and Fenn was working for them. And Fenn was told to meet this one Vietnamese leader and just to see what kind of intelligence is, see if we could use him. So he met him at this place called, I think it was called Dragon's Gate. I think it was a hotel near north of Hanoi. And so he met him. The guy spoke perfect English. Ho Chi Minh spoke five languages: Russian,
Wow.
Chinese, French. I mean, he was incredible. He was a true intellectual, and he was never marketed that way to the U.S. press. He was always portrayed
Yeah.
as evil, nasty person. But so as they're talking, Charles Fenn set up a meeting with Ho Chi Minh and his group, the Viet Minh, with a team from the OSS. They had a code name. I have it in the book. I think it was something like Eagle or something, where they parachuted in and met with Ho Chi Minh and his men and brought them weapons. And so we armed them. We armed them. So Ho Chi Minh was meeting with Charles Fenn. He says, I have an immediate need. I need six 45s and all ammo to support it. I don't know how many rounds of ammo, but so Charles Fenn got him that as the first test. And then Charles Fenn said, I would like to meet General Chennault. And Fenn was kind of shocked by that. He says, why would you like to meet him? Because he was instrumental in fighting the
Hmm.
Japanese in China with the Flying Tigers. They knew about the Flying
Wow.
Tigers. So he wanted to meet him. So Fenn put on his thinking cap. He said, if I go through official channels, they'll never approve a meeting of Ho Chi Minh with General Chennault. But he knew Chennault. He knew Chennault's secretary. So he contacted his secretary and said, can you set up a meeting with me? I want to introduce him to this Vietnamese fellow. So he spoke to Chenault directly, and Chenault says, okay, I'll meet with him, but I don't want to discuss any politics with him because they knew they were leaning towards becoming communist.
Right.
Communism was rage in 1919 during Ho Chi Minh's um, growth years. It was a rage through Europe. We had a communist party here in the United States. It was very popular. Everybody thought, oh, this is the next coming thing, down with capitalism, up with communism. So Ho Chi Minh was leaning in that direction, and everyone knew it. So Chenault didn't want to upset the apple cart and get into a discussion of politics. They said, okay, as long as he doesn't talk politics. So they're having this meeting, and Chenault thanks him graciously for returning. At that time, he had returned two U.S. airmen who were shot down, fixed them up, brought them back to base so they could fly again. And during the meeting, as the meeting was ending, Ho Chi Minh looked at General and says, excuse me, General, I have one final question for you. And then Charles Fenn just kind of rolled his eyes. You could sense it. He was writing. He says, oh my God, no, he's going to ask him about politics. He promised he wouldn't ask him about politics. So Ho Chi Minh says, I wonder if I could have a picture of you, General Chenault. And he said, oh, sure. And he called his secretary, I think Nancy. He said, come bring the photos in. So Chenault had an inventory of photos, and he said, here, pick one you like. So he picked a photo of him standing by, I think it was one of the Flying Tiger planes. And then he said, General Chenault, would you autograph this for me?
Wow.
So he did. And this is true. This is all
What a
happened.
story. Yeah, it's
So,
unbelievable.
so Ho Chi Minh took that picture back to his house, had it framed, and hung it on his wall. And he kept it
Wow.
there all throughout the war. This picture of, now, how many people knew that? The guy who was
That,
fighting had a picture of an
that's not
American.
the lead story.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. Just unbelievable. And then from that point forward, Charles Fenn wound up rotating back to the States. He lived in the States for a while, and then he went back to England. But he and Ho Chi Minh became pen pals. They regularly communicated. They regularly wrote letters back and forth. And I tried to look up Fenn in Ireland to see if I could contact a member of his family so I could see some of those letters, but there are a
Yeah.
million fans in Ireland. It was totally frustrating. I'd have to have someone who knew the family, and I didn't go that far. Ancestry hasn't developed that much at that time, and
Right.
I don't think they had their international part. But anyway, that was just one of the fascinating stories I discovered, and I mean, you couldn't make that stuff up. It's just incredible.
So you went down that deep rabbit hole
Yeah,
with Ho Chi Minh. And so
yeah,
what, with Vietnam, like you mentioned, at the beginning of you talked about, hey, there's protesting, there is,
oh yeah,
it's just a totally it's hard for us to believe in the GWAT era because
yeah,
for the most part, 9/11 happened and everyone, got on the train and
yeah,
similar to World War II, World War II was,
yeah,
it was almost like a holy war. It was a just
right,
war.
right.
Um, so, when you wrote the book, what was the purpose? What did you want people to understand about Vietnam?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, how we got into it and the lies that were told by our leaders about progress in the war. The war's almost over. We only need a few 100,000 more men. That was Westmoreland's constant. Towards the end, he wanted 200,000 more men. And Johnson said, he didn't say it to his face. He said, okay, thank you, General. He went up to McNamara and said, he's out of his goddamn mind. I mean, they have quotes of him saying that. He's never going to get 200,000 more men. Um, so yeah, I want them to understand the mistakes that were made, that the fact that we had no strategy. We really had no strategy. It was kind of an ego thing between the services. The Navy wanted to do it all, then the Air Force wanted to do it all. The only service that kind of rejected the idea was the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, the commandant, actually no, it was the commander of the Pacific group of Marines. I forget what his title is. But he said you never want to get into a land war in Asia. And he gave advice like that to McNamara, and it wasn't taken, obviously. We went down that rabbit hole, and we were left with all these lies. I relied a lot on a book by General McMaster, who I met at Fort Benning several years
Hmm.
ago, one of our reunions there. Real nice guy. He wrote a book called Dereliction of Duty, where he describes the incompetence of how the Joint Chiefs worked back then, that it was one service against another service, and no one thought of strategy. What was our
Right.
goal of being there? We were just kind of hanging around. Search and destroy is a misnomer. You walk around until you get shot at, and then you respond. It was just a crazy, crazy time in our history. You hope it never gets repeated. And then we see Afghanistan, kind of a similar thing happened there. And I also want people, just to go back to the main point here, to understand the effect this had on guys like me that came home to being totally disrespected, thought of as the enemy. Um, I think all Vietnam vets were happy that the GWAT vets were treated so well, that everyone's so thankful for them. I mean, I remember during that time, right after 9/11, I have Purple Heart tags on one of my vehicles, and I was driving, and a guy blew the horn right next to me at a stoplight. And I said, "What's his problem?" I rolled down the window, and he said, "Thank you for your service." I almost broke down right there. I said, "What?
Wow.
You're kidding." Because well, I tell it in the story, and it's this actually happened. I was wounded during TED 68. Short round hit us. We were advancing on we call it a reinforced position. The enemy was all dug in, and we were trying to we had helicopter gun strikes, but the helicopters were getting shot up. They said that that's too much for us. You got to call in an airstrike, and we were too close for an airstrike. So we called in artillery, and the artillery was at the edge of its range. And so when the artillery, 105s are at the edge of their range, there have to be, I think, two officers on the whatever they call it, the battery, to double check and make sure they're firing properly. They have the guns aligned.
Right.
Well, one gun was off. Our company commander at the time, Chuck Chaplinsky, uh, said he called in. Usually, I thought we would call in 5 guns, 2 rounds, but he said he called in three guns, 2 rounds of high explosive. So you'd expect 3 guns from a well-trained battery to go at once. That's your goal. Boom. You have 3 guns shooting all at the same time, but it wasn't that way. It was boom, boom, boom. So you'd have 3 rounds landing, crash, crash, crash. And one, because I was far away from him at that point. I didn't hear that. I wasn't near a radio. I was a squad leader at that time, didn't have a radio. And there was a big explosion behind me, about 50 yards behind me, and I turn around and I see the dust. And I thought, now the enemy they had mortars. They had like an 81 mortar, but it wouldn't cause that much. So I thought that was an artillery round. We have a short round issue here. And then everybody got up and started moving. So I thought, okay, that must have been the last round. And then next thing I know, I'm flying through the air, and
Oh my God.
a round landed right behind me, killed a guy who was standing literally right behind me. He absorbed most of the blast. I'm probably alive because he lost his life that day. It got me in the legs, and I just went flying. I went flying straight ahead. Maybe I felt like forever, but I crashed to the ground, and you don't feel anything at first. I never went unconscious, but I remember as I was flying through the air and when I immediately landed, everything went black and white. I didn't see in color. It was just black and white like an old movie. And that was weird. And then the pain hit me, and I thought, oh my God, I've never felt anything like this. I was hit 2 times in one leg and 3 times in another leg with shrapnel. And it's pretty brutal. Doc came up, hit me with morphine, and the pain stopped immediately. I was just so amazed. I remember, and our doc just died a few years ago of stomach cancer, probably caused by Agent Orange. But I looked at him. I said, "What the hell was that?" He said, "That was morphine." I said, "My God." The minute he
Wow.
hit me, the pain stopped. It was unbelievable. It was instant. I was just, because I thought I was either going to black out or die right there on the battlefield. And I went back, and the first medevac they called in for me, it got shot down. So I thought, this isn't looking good. It's starting to get dark. And I thought, I might be out here all night, my legs bleeding. And finally, they got a second chopper in, and I rode that back to our base camp, LZ Baldy, and the aid station. They just poured bottles of peroxide on my legs and wrapped me up. And I went to Chu Lai for it was called Second Surgical Hospital. Um, Essentially, in Korea, they call it a MASH unit. It's
Right.
the same thing, surgical hospital, comma, military, mobile army. And I was there for several days. But what they did in Vietnam, they removed the shrapnel, but they left your wound open. They didn't sew you up. They left it open because of fear of bacteria. So
Oh wow.
they would come around each night and change the bandage, which was hell on earth because all your nerves are exposed. And it was some of them. I begged to give me something for the pain, and they wouldn't. and they would just rip off those bandages. I mean, they'd do it gently, but it felt like they were just ripping the nerves right out of my legs. It was just so painful. And I had to withstand that for, I think, about a week, maybe a little over a week. I went from July south to Quin Yon to what was called an evacuation hospital, 67th Evac. And then from there, after I was there for probably 4 days, 4 or 5 days, they carted me to a C-130. They had an airport right there, Quin Yon, and they flew me to the Philippines. So I spent one night at Clark Air Base in an Air Force hospital bed. And I told him, you're not changing those bandages. I said, I'm going to be in Japan tomorrow. They're going to work on me. You're not changing those bandages tonight. And they brought in an officer. He was going to say, oh, we need to change those. You'll lose. I said, you're not touching my legs. I am had it with that. I'll be in Japan tomorrow. They'll fix me up there. So sure enough, we get on a C-141 the next day, flew to Yokohama, I think it's pronounced, Japan. It's in the southern part of Japan. And then I was flown by helicopter to Camp Zama, which was an old World War. It's gone now. It was an old World War II, post World War II hospital built the old-fashioned way, where they spread it out in different wings in case you were bombed. You know, they would only affect that wing and not the entire hospital. It was a tall building. But I spent probably close to a month there, 3 weeks, I would say, to a month, something like that. I had the surgery, and then I had to go into physical therapy, which was long and brutal. But I mean, they pushed you, but it was good. It was exactly what I needed. And then I was scheduled to go home because Tet was really in full swing at that point. They needed the hospital beds, and one of my wounds was in the heel of my left foot, and not to play on words, but the heel had a hard time healing.
Yeah.
It was just bleeding and bleeding. They couldn't get it to stop, and they put stitches in it. It would still bleed, and they left shrapnel in it because it would have been more not more destructive to remove the shrapnel than just to let it be. So they said, the doc came to me one day and he said, Gary, we're going to have to send you home. I said, oh, darn, really? So they sent me home, and they gave me a uniform, no markings on it, a Class A uniform. And they said, we'll give you crutch. I said, no, I want shoes. I'm going to walk out of here. I am not, because I got to the point where I could walk. It's just that I had a bloody heel. So I said, bandage it up. I'm going to fit it in a pair of shoes. I'm going to walk out of here, and I'm going to walk onto U.S. soil. I'm not going to be carried anywhere again. So I did that, and we landed, about 20 hours later. We stopped at Fort Lewis, oddly enough, to refuel, and then we went on to Andrews Air Base, which is just a suburb of right outside of D.C. here. And then the Army sent an ambulance to pick me up. Apparently, I was the only one going to, they try to put you in a hospital, a military hospital near your home. And Fort Belvoir was close to my home at that point, as it is now. So I was the only guy in the hospital. And these were the old Cadillac. You remember the old Cadillac? You probably see them in a movie we call them a cherry on top. They would have that
Oh
one
yeah.
red beam on top. And the windows were clear. So I'm in there, and I've got my jacket off, my shirt on, and my left leg is all bandaged up. My foot is all bandaged up, and I'm laying on the cot. And as we get to the gate, there's a group, probably 30 protesters, kids my age, college kids probably, that were in flannel shirts. It was a chilly day, and the end of March or the beginning of April, I forget the exact date. And they're shouting all kinds of things, and they only had two air policemen there. So they called it for reinforcements, and they couldn't clear them. They were blocking us from leaving, and they were yelling all kinds of nice things to me. And they apparently had the date when the planes were coming in with medevac troops. And I'll never forget this. I have it in the book, and get a little emotional here. But there was a guy and a girl that broke through the two police, and they came right up to the window, and they could see me. It wasn't tinted or anything. They're looking right at me, and the guy looks at me and says, "I'm glad you were wounded." And then his girlfriend, probably right next to him, says, "Yeah, and I wish you were killed." So that was
Hmm. That
that
was
was
the
a
that
welcome
was the
home.
tenor of that time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's,
But that was that in a way, I'm almost thankful for that, because that taught me what my status was. back in America as a soldier who'd been to Vietnam, that many people felt that way. Not everyone, of course, but a lot of people, especially kids my age, felt that way. The picture of the girl that was napalmed in that village made Time magazine. We That was a South Vietnamese Air Force operation. We didn't do that, but
Yeah.
yet we took every soldier, every airman took blame for that. It was all our fault. So that was tough, and I uh, I really never talked about it, especially to civilians. Civilians have no frame of reference. They don't understand anything about it. I will talk with vets as I always have. You're just more comfortable being around vets. They see, you don't have to explain things to them. They know, what you're talking about. They can sense what you went through, even if they weren't infantry. I mean, I think really anyone that served in a combat zone probably has some trace of PTSD in them because you're a target. You're always a target. When you're in a foreign country and you're at war, you're a target. Whether you're a clerk, whether you're a cook in a mess hall, whether you're an infantryman, whatever your job is, you're a target, and you never forget that. So yeah, that's how the story ends. Just about. I
Yeah.
come home, rendezvous with my family and my new wife, and I end the story there because I didn't want it to go any longer. I didn't realize it. 300 pages. I better stop this. No one's going to want to read it.
Well, you mentioned just now, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, um, like I said before, it's hard for us to imagine that that atmosphere that you guys went through. But you just mentioned, you can share and share that um, with veterans that are in the association. You've mentioned a few times during this interview, just um, that you've been to the reunions and you've been able to use the association to connect and stay connected. So
Yeah,
can you just talk a little bit about how the association has affected you since Vietnam and been able to open up and continue to live the legacy and keep those that you lost. I mean, you talked about
yeah,
it. Those that
yeah.
you lost, keep them alive too.
Oh, sure, sure. Well, it, the 35th. I mean, the regiment is a wonderful association. I don't think I would have connected with so many of my friends. I mean, I probably have, well, there was more. Some of them have died off, but I still have a handful of guys that I served with that were there that went over on
Oh.
the ship with me that shared the same experiences I had. I mean, without the association, I would have never found them. I mean, you just don't, there's no connection. There was no means to locate people. I tried to locate people before an association. I actually, when they dedicated the Vietnam Memorial, well, we call it the wall, and it was in the 80s, I think, mid to late 80s when they dedicated that. And I went to that, and I had a 25th hat on, a boonie hat. And a guy approached me, and he was in the 25th Association. The 25th Infantry Division has an association, and he asked me to join that and asked me what I do. I said, yeah, I'm a CPA. And he said, well, great, we need a treasurer. So I became the treasurer of that association. But that association is quite different. It's not as focused. We have people from many different MOSs, virtually no one who served with me and served in my part of the country in that, but a bunch of good guys. I mean, we're all veterans. We all did our share. But the nice thing about the 35th Association is it's so relevant. These are guys that we fought with. I mean, I still call guys on the phone. Sonny Danhouse is a good friend. He and I were in the same squad initially, and we're still in touch, still alive. And it's great to talk to him and other guys when I'm there. I mean, we get together, we have a blast, and it's nice to see the children getting involved. He brings his kids, and some others bring their children, and spouses of guys who were killed in action still come to
Yeah.
reunions, and it's very touching that they feel that close connection with us and the organization. You know, they're not bitter, they're not angry. I mean, they're just very, I think, thankful to have that connection. I think it makes their life a little easier as well. So
Yeah.
it's been a positive thing in my life, definitely. And yeah, it's great fun, especially to meet the younger guys that have different stories to tell than we do. When 25th was in Afghanistan, I was writing with a particular soldier. You know, I forget what organization did it, but it wasn't a 25th Association. It was something else that paired you with a soldier, and you write with him. I sent him goodie packages like I used to get in the mail, and I remember I got a text message from him, and it started out like, so it's like, holy shit, what do they call it? My Hummer just got blown up. I was in the back. I got thrown 100 yards. I'm okay. You know, he was just full of life. He's like,
Wow.
wow. But he survived that, and they immediately sent him on R&R to, I forget where they went, somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula that was calm. But it was fun being in touch with him, and I learned a little bit about the capability of those Hummers. He crossed a river into one, and those things weighed a ton, especially the ones that were armored up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Drove right across the river, waterproof. I said, "You mean they're waterproof? The water? Yeah, it's incredible." He showed me a picture of it. The water is halfway up the side of it, and they're just driving right through the river to get to the other side. It's amazing. So it was fun. Yeah, and I do enjoy talking with the younger folks. It's really great. And when you go back to Hawaii, I've been back to Hawaii a couple of times, and you are really treated well. They treat you well. They're happy to see you. They open up. Sergeant Major Disk uh, got me involved. I went over for I think the 100th anniversary,
Oh,
something like
yeah. I was there.
that.
It was a
Yeah,
really cool
it was
event.
fun. They had a ball. I went to the ball. I gave a speech at they had a promotion ceremony for new sergeants, and I gave a little talk there, which was I really enjoyed, and yeah, it was fun. And it's good to go back there.
Yeah.
Uh, so anyway,
Well, Gary, I appreciate you telling your story and
sure.
just giving me your time and giving us your time. And thank you
Absolutely,
for all you did. Um, it's hard to put into words what you guys went through and just from the bottom of my heart, thank you
yeah,
for what you did in Vietnam. And thank you for writing this book. And I'm going to send you a
sure,
note once I get it.
sure.
So everybody that is watching, Easy Giggles, a Vietnam Saga. Um, it's a
I'll
great
sign it for
read.
you. I'll sign it for you at the reunion if you come.
I'll be
Yeah,
there. We'll see you at the
that'll
reunion
increase
and
the
I'll get
value.
signed. Yeah, absolutely. But
Well, it's
thank you so
great
much,
talking to you,
Gary.
Joel. Yeah, thanks
Yeah, you,
for doing this. It's a worthwhile thing to do, and I enjoyed getting ready for this. I had to review some things I said in the book. It's been 2 years, and I'm
wow.
looking at the book and going, "Wow, I did a pretty good job. This is." All right, thanks a lot, Joel. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Gary. Take
All right.
care.